Hello, I'm Anna O'Donnell and I'm here in the walled town of Athenry at the castles. And today we're talking about medieval herbs. And I think people have really lost their connection with the garden and herbs. And so I brought along a good number of herbs from my own garden to just kind of show you how easy it is to grow them in pots. And they're wonderful. And it was very important during medieval times, not just for food, but also for medicine. Herbs were used for a number of different things. And two things I didn't bring that were medicines from the time period are nettles. And nettles are actually wonderful to make a soup out of, and they're very good for a diuretic. They're very healthy for your body, they're healthy for your heart, but they're not so friendly. And the other thing I didn't bring, which isn't an herb, but it often occupies the garden, is a snail. And one of the cures for burns and scalds in medieval times were the slime of a snail. So you could rub the snail on your arm. And actually modern medicine has discovered that that slime from the snail actually has antiviral, antibacterial, antioxidants, and all sorts of amazing things. So people in this time period knew a great deal about the world around them and how to apply it to their lives. Aspirin was actually originally made from the willow tree, salicylic acid, which comes out of the willow. And so if you had a headache, you could chew on willow bark, and that would sort you out. And modern heart medicine made from digitalis was actually the ancient foxglove plant. So we always have around us the things that can make us feel a lot better and cure us. In front of me, I have some sage, and sage is excellent for any cough or anything to do with the chest. And there's just so many properties. Lavender not only looks nice and smells nice, but it's used as a disinfectant and kind of to clear the air in the room. And what I did with my lavender was I made a lavender shortbread. And so this is a 12th century recipe. Average person might not have made it, but if you were able to get your hands on some white flour, wheat flour, it was something that wasn't as common. You'd usually have oat flour or barley flour, but the wealthier people had white flour. And during the Battle of Aughrim, when the French were coming in, they were saying there is no bread in Ireland because they were used to a wheat flour that made you a nice fluffy bread. And so I also made a bread with some herbs today, and this is a rosemary bread. So here we have our wonderful rosemary and one of my favorite herbs. And it's just yeast, because they didn't have baking soda until the 1860s, and all raising agents were either eggs or yeast. So this is just a very simple recipe of wheat flour, oat flour, and a little white flour. And then we have our rosemary and a bit of oil and of course the yeast. There were all sorts of amazing cures for things. And one of the cures for a sty in the eye was leek. You would grind leek and garlic together and put it with ox gall and red wine and leave it in a brass bowl for 9 days. And then when it turned into a nice sticky goop mixture, you'd put it on your eye with a feather and apply that onto your eye for a number of days, and that would cure your sty. So there were just no ends of cures, but the culinary aspect of things were very important. So what's on this table is a representation of what you might have in your medieval garden. The leeks, these are broad beans, which are great, and so much of what was grown you could also preserve in many ways. And our lovely peas, garlic was popular, and of course bay. And I do a recipe that is very simple. I didn't bring a raw chicken with me today, but I'll talk about the recipe. And it's a very easy recipe to do. You just take your whole chicken, and you would have been able to get a lemon in medieval times. It would have been a luxury item, but you just stab the lemon a bunch of times. And then I take rosemary and sage and marjoram. I have some marjoram here. I have some lemon thyme and a couple of cloves of garlic that you poke as well, and jam them into the carcass of the chicken and just put it in and roast it. And the juice of the herbs and the juice of the lemon infuses into the chicken. It's absolutely delicious. If you were eating a very repetitive diet, the herbs gave you the opportunity to change things up a bit. And you might add different herbs to your stew, your lamb stew, and you can make a rub. There's a medieval rub that goes on the outside of a leg of lamb using a lot of the green herbs like marjoram, sage, oregano, and that would be mixed in with some lard and rubbed into the lamb, and then that lamb would be put on a spit to roast, and trust me, it's absolutely delicious. There are many different herbs for medical things. Anise was used for flatulence, and borage was for respiratory problems and the stomach. Vetch was used to increase the appetite. Coriander was to combat fever. Flax was used to stimulate the appetite. Mint for stomach problems, and we have some mint here. So there were just all sorts of things. Everybody seemed to know what to do, and interestingly enough, there were people called wise women. The women kind of handled a lot of the medicine in this time period, and it wasn't until they had doctors, so to speak, that came in that you had started to have a lot of problems because they didn't know that the germs existed. So they believed that you might have bad humors in your body, and they'd attach leeches to take the bad humors out of your system. But when doctors were going from one patient to the next, they were actually spreading a lot of diseases. So many women were dying from childbirth at the hands of doctors later on in the 18th, 19th century. And when they were being delivered by midwives who just dealt with one person at a time, they didn't have a problem. So what I'm going to make right now is a bit of lunch. And a medieval salad would have been a little different from the salad today. So we'll have some spinach. We have a few kind of salad leaves out of the garden, but we also have dandelion. And dandelion was used for a lot of different things. I know everybody hates it now, but interestingly enough, dandelion fixes calcium into the soil. And so if you have a lot of dandelions growing all over the place, it may be because your soil is deficient in calcium. And evidently, once there's enough calcium in the soil, they stop growing there. So we have our lovely dandelions and our spinach from the garden, and they would have put different kinds of things in. So for example, I'm going to put some apple. Apple would have been an easy thing to grow, and we'll cut that up and add that to this lovely salad. You might have had wild strawberries. These are quite nice looking strawberries compared to the little tiny wild strawberries that would have been around, but people would be collecting everything, and everything had a purpose, and everything had a use. And I think today we just run off to the shelf and pick something off it and have no connection to it, but people really appreciated what was around them and what they needed to survive. So nothing nicer than strawberries. And I'm also going to put in some fresh mint, which is delicious, and a bit of coriander, which is also very nice. So all these things would have been part of the daily life, to go out to the herb garden, pick these things, go out to the hedgerows, pick your berries. All of this was just a natural part of your life. So where did my mint go? Aha, here it is. And I have, there are lots of different kinds of mints. And you can also grow geranium for use in cooking. And one thing that I used to do often is you take the geranium leaf and you line the bottom of your pan with the rose geranium. Is particularly beautiful. And so you take the rose geranium and line the bottom of the pan, pour the cake batter in and bake it. And when you flip it over, you have this lovely pattern from the plant on it. You can put a bit of powdered sugar and you get this wonderful scent of the rose geranium. So the unusual addition to this particular salad are rose petals, and they used roses in cooking. You would make rose water. If you were exotic, you might be able to get orange flower water from Spain or another part of the world. They would eat primroses, they would eat violets. So all of these things were quite common. And we've lost our connections to this. If you go to a good restaurant, you might find some pansies or some nasturtiums on your salad. But nasturtiums would have come from the New World, and not many people would have had them. So look at that beautiful, delicious, freshly made, locally grown salad. Now, we'll stop talking about that for a minute and talk about the preservation of these herbs. I have here herbs that I picked and tied up earlier, and there's a variety of them. And what you would have done is just cut off a clump, which I shall do. Whoops, stay. I'm just going to get some marjoram, and it's as simple as just taking your string and tying it around and putting it, what they would have done was put it over the open fire, you know, hang it from the mantle. But any place out of the sun, because the sun can take out kind of the vital oils. Like I said earlier, preservation was very, very important because you had a growing season that only lasted a certain amount of time. And in order to be able to eat nice things in the spring when nothing was growing, you'd have your dried herbs to add to things. So then you just hang that, and you'll have some lovely dried marjoram to put in your food later on. Bay was very important. Bay leaf, parsley. The ancient Romans would braid parsley and roses and put them around the edges of a banquet hall. And parsley was supposed to promote frivolity and mirth. So I'm always happy around parsley personally. So maybe what we'll do now is try a little bit of this shortbread. And it's so simple. 1/3 of it is sugar, 2/3 of it is butter, and you cream together your sugar and your butter, and then you just add the flour until it's kind of a crumbly mixture, and you press it into the pan. And this particular recipe is from the 12th century. So all you need is a cup of tea and a little bit of lavender shortbread, and it'll make you smile. Absolutely delicious. So I really do encourage people to have a little home herb garden in some pots. They grow effortlessly, they really do. You don't have to do much of anything. And you can add them into your bread, into your pastries, into your salads, with your meats, with your vegetables. And I think it's something that people should embrace far more than they do.